I was hoping to give you a bit of an introduction to the topic of Rasāyana and a bit of a bird's eye view on the topic, and then to go a bit into the kinds of questions that have been coming up for me in my research on Rasāyana. So, that concerns first of all the question, what is Rasāyana, which is not as obvious a topic as it might first seem. I'll be talking about Rasāyana in mostly medical literature, so Sanskrit medical literature, and a little bit about alchemical literature. So the term, when found in Sanskrit medical literature, first of all, describes one of 8 branches or subject areas of classical Indian medicine, also known as AyurYog. The oldest Sanskrit medical treatises define medicine as consisting of 8 parts. And Rasāyana is one of these 8 parts. So this is what I mean when I say it's one of 8 branches or subject areas of medicine. Then Rasāyana, the term Rasāyana, describes therapies that together constitute this branch of medicine. So it includes the medicines used, but also the methodology that is applied for Rasāyana therapy. And then finally, it's about, it can designate substances and formulations used in these therapies. So to give you an example, here we have Brahma Rasāyana. So you see the name used as part of the formulation. This is a recipe that is already found in the oldest medical treatise known to us, the Charaka Samhita, or Charaka's collection. So you have medicines that are called Rasāyana. You also have formulations that I would consider a Rasāyana, but that don't have Rasāyana in their title. And then substances that are Rasāyana substances. So here I have amla, that is candied and sugared endic myroglands, and this substance in itself would be considered a Rasāyana substance. So I'm actually, we have this show and tell element to our workshop, and I would like to give you a taster of Brahma Rasāyana. To keep it hygienic, we put it into these papers, so I just did that, so you can have a little taste. General rejuvenation purposes, and it doesn't taste too bad. You don't have to eat it, but you can, just to get a sort of idea of what this might taste like. And I also would like to share some candied amla with you, if you could pass this around and just have a taste. Amla has helps digestion, but having one to do terrible things. So if I can pass this around. We can talk about what you thought about the Brahma Rasāyana later. In the context of Indian alchemy and yatrachemistry, so Rasavada or Rasavidya, Rasashastra, Rasāyana, the term Rasāyana, first of all, describes alchemical operations. So alchemical operations, that's all that is involved in the making and taking of elixirs, and these elixirs are supposed to give the user immortality, but sometimes also liberation in the living body. And it's an umbrella term for all the processes that happen. So the preparation of the medicines, the complicated purification processes, the mixing of the substances together, the rituals that happen in this context, the mantras that are spoken. Then finally, the preparation of the practitioner's body, because the practitioner has to undergo some purifications for body and mind. The moment of intake, and then the moment of transformation that the practitioner undergoes. All of that comes under Rasāyana. So Rasāyana in this case describes a series of related processes. In alchemical literature, you also find Rasāyana describing a type of therapy that is very similar to what you find in medical treatises. And again, also substances and formulations used in this type of therapy. Sometimes, in fact, recipes that you find exactly like that in medical literature. Sometimes you find these recipes first in alchemical literature and later in medical literature. So there's obviously a lot of exchange in this area. In alchemical literature, you sometimes have mixed chapters, so sometimes you have separate chapters, Rasāyana chapters that's like medicine, Rasāyana chapters that's about alchemical operations, and sometimes you have large ones, Rasāyana chapters, which are mostly about alchemical preparations, operations, but that also seem to have an element of medical Rasāyana. So something that is about rejuvenation, longevity, and so on. These are sometimes really difficult to tease apart, and you don't really know where one begins, where one ends. And I think I need to do quite a lot more work on this to really understand the interplay in such mixed chapters. You will find sometimes that the word Rasāyana is used to describe alchemy altogether, so the body of knowledge. And I really wonder about this usage. I'm not sure where it comes from. I've seen people use it quite a lot. Looking at alchemical texts, so the Sanskrit alchemical texts, I find Rasavada, Rasavidya, Rasashastra, I find it described in other Sanskrit texts as Raseshvara, Siddhanta. I don't find it described as Rasayana. The Rasayana is about the processes, the operations, not the body of knowledge. But in modern usage, you do definitely find Rasayana used as such, and I found it going back to the 19th century. And the sources that I found for this were all from Bengal. So I wonder whether there's maybe some Bengali tradition of calling Rasayana the body of knowledge, as alchemy. So there's some more work to be done here. When I refer to alchemy, I usually use Rasa Shastra. Here in this talk, I will simply refer to it as alchemy. So what is Rasayana? Let's have some definitions from the Sanskrit medical texts, starting with the Sushruta Samhita. This is Sushruta's collection, a medical treatise that dates to the early centuries CE, where Rasayana is defined as follows. The doctrine of Rasayana, and maybe the system of Rasayana, the word is Tantra, Rasayana Tantra, concerns preserving youthful vigor, promoting longevity, mental power and strength, and eliminating disease. So you have not so much rejuvenation actually, but anti-aging, so stopping or halting the process of aging, and then general sort of, longevity and strength and well-being, and then on the other side, disease, eliminating disease. This definition is given in the context of a definition of medicine. Just before, Sushruta counts the branches of medicine and says Rasayana is one of 8 parts of medicine. Rasayana is the second last, and it's followed by Vajikarana or Vrishya, which is virility treatments or sexual stamina treatments, and Rasayana and Vrishya or Vajikarana are very strongly interlinked. In the early texts, the recipes are very, very different. It's really easy to spot what is a Rasayana, what is a Vrishya or a Vajikarana recipe. But starting from the 7th century onwards, so Ashtanga Hridaya Samhita onwards, the recipes become more and more similar. And later, very often, you have these chapters in one because they really seem to have more or less the same aims and also then the same recipes. Now, in the Charaka Samhita, probably the oldest of the medical texts known to us, which also dates to the early centuries CE, you have in the chapter on Rasayana itself a definition of medical therapy, in this case called Bcud. And Charaka, or the text, states that medicine, Bcud, has 2 parts, and that the first part is about promoting strength in the healthy, and the other part is about eliminating disease in those who are ill. And Rasayana is supposed to be about promoting strength in the healthy, as is Vrishya or Vajikarana. Charaka is, however, very quick to add that this is a matter of emphasis, that you can also eliminate disease with both Rasayana and Vajikarana. Charaka goes on to then give a more close definition of what Rasayana is, and I think you will see this definition in various forms a number of times today. I've seen some of the PowerPoints of the other speakers, so I think you will find different versions of this. So here Rasayana is defined as follows. Through Rasayana, a man gains longevity, memory, mental power, health, youthful vigor, a great radiance, complexion and voice, an extremely strong body and keen senses, mastery of speech, respect, and beauty. Rasayana is a means for attaining excellent bodily elements, beginning with rasa. So looking at that definition, it's a lot longer than what Sushruta had to say, but they cover a lot of the same ground, so longevity, youthfulness, general well-being. I would say that Charaka has a little bit more emphasis on outer appearance, which you can see is the great radiance, complexion, voice. The bottom sentence is my interpretation of the words, where I say, for attaining excellent bodily elements, I am interpreting the words that occur there, which is Shastanam Rasadinam, which is actually, so it doesn't actually say bodily elements, it says the praise ones beginning with rasa, and I'm interpreting rasa there as a bodily element, and thus saying that Charaka is here speaking about a digestive process. There are good reasons for thinking that, but one could also translate rasa rather more neutrally, and I think we will hear a different translation from Dr. Mas later on today. One element that is introduced here in the Charaka Samhita is sort of hinted at with mastery of speech. The word used is Vag Siddhi, and so the power of speech, if you will. And the commentators at least understand this as a special power, namely whatever you say becomes true. So the person who has taken this Rasayana influences reality, in other words. So this is a part of Rasayana that I always try to, try and kind of fail to categorize. The first word that comes to mind is sort of supernatural results of Rasayana, but of course supernatural only is true depending on your worldview. So it depends on how you understand matter. And I don't think that the medical authors themselves would have understood this to be quite as extraordinary as it seems now. And this would include things like being able to fly after taking the medicine, having an indestructible body, living for 800 years, subduing the will of the king, making people do what you want in any case, but also having good luck. Having good luck comes a lot of times, and warding off bad fortune. So these are all things that you can get through Rasayana. So when one looks at the actual works, here's a list of works that I consulted for this talk, and just generally in my research I actually consulted a bit more, plus often the commentaries. On the left we have works that have sections dedicated to Rasayana, and on the right are works that do not have dedicated sections to Rasayana, or at least these are not transmitted. So there are different structural reasons for the ones on the right not to have chapters. I was talking earlier about the 8 parts of medicine, and while the medical works never quite then are written to follow the sequence of order of the 8 parts of medicine, you do find, especially in later works, that you do at least have chapters that kind of follow that order. In that Rasayana, chapters are very often at the end of a work. This is not true for Charaka and Sushruta, but it is true for a lot of the later works. And it is often followed by Vajikarana or Vrishya, and is often preceded by chapters on poisoning. So it's kind of easy to find things. In the works that don't have, this is also a rough sort of timeline, basically starting early century CE and then going down to the bottom to the 16th century, and then sort of it's everything in between. So the ones on the right don't have chapters on Rasayana, and the reasons are, there's different reasons. For example, the Madhavanidana, which is 8th century, I think, is only about the causes of disease, so it doesn't actually talk about therapy at all. So actually the Siddha Yoga here on the left kind of is the answer to the Madhavanidana and gives all the sort of therapies in the sequence of order suggested by Madhava. So we're not very surprised not to find a section on Rasayana in the Madhavanidana. The Shangadhara Samhita is just differently organized in that, so a lot of the medical works have chapters on disease and then what do we do against disease. Shangadhara is organized on a different principle. It lists kinds of medicine, so pills, linctuses, and so on, medicines based on metals and so on. And you will find Rasayana formulations in these chapters, just not a separate Rasayana chapter. In fact, even those on the left, which do have chapters on Rasayana in them, will also have Rasayana formulations throughout. You will sometimes find the same recipe in different sections. So Rasayana recipes can be against specific diseases. So let's say one thing is against cough and also against abdominal complaints. You may then find it in the chapter on cough and then again in the chapter on abdominal complaints. This is not true for every single Rasayana formulation, but you can find it in certain recipes. And in fact, one of the recipes that sort of comes to mind for this, that sort of is mentioned in a lot of medical works, whether they have a chapter or not, is a recipe called Pitpali Vardamana, so the growing of long pepper. This is long pepper, and the recipe would be that you start with 10 of these. You eat 10 of these, and then every day you eat 10 more until you reach 100. And then you reduce again until you're back to 10, and that's the therapy over. I'm going to pass these around. Please help yourself to one. And you can try eating it, but it is pepper. So it's a different kind of pepper than you might be used to, but you know, I wouldn't advise eating a whole one at once. So it's kind of safe, but you know, yeah, you have your coughing here. But you can sort of see one of the aspects of Rasayana that I can't really go into, but is that Rasayana therapy is unpleasant. So, you know, thinking of going into a Rasayana cure, having a holiday to do Rasayana, you're not going to have a good time if it is done in the traditional manner. So now, thinking of, I should go back one again. I'm going to now talk about results that I got looking at the works on the left, and at the moment not looking at the ones on the right. So I was trying to get a bit more of a handle on what Rasayana is for, and I divided the things that it is for into two big groups. One being specific disease or specific disease group, and the other group being everything else, which I there sort of went to the semantic group Rasayana, which of course doesn't mean anything really if you think about it, because the semantic group Rasayana should include disease as well, according to the definitions of Charaka and Sushruta. But just for, you know, for convenience, I've done these two groups. Now this semantic group Rasayana, or the other group there, has a lot of things, you know, about longevity, about also rejuvenation, about general health. So you can see words on the left, and sorry to the non-Sanskritists in the room that I didn't put in translations here, but it just means the practitioner or the user is free of disease, or on the right-hand side it's all about medicine. So medicine kills all disease, or it gives sexual stamina, it gives intelligence, or it gives strength, and so on. One thing that's really missing, and I should have added it, is a good digestion. This is something that comes up really, really often. And as I mentioned before, also these sort of supernatural effects, or these sort of extraordinary effects, which are not quite listed there, except of course the longevity can be extreme longevity. But I would like to look a bit more closely at diseases and the kind of trends and patterns that emerge when you look at specific diseases. And basically what I did is I counted the recipes, and then I counted how many of them actually mention specific diseases, and this is the result. So please take the numbers about recipes with a pinch of salt. It's sometimes really difficult to decide what is one recipe, what is two recipes, and so on, because sometimes you have a recipe and there's sort of add-ons and so on. So this is a really kind of rough count. Charaka is the least rough count, because very helpfully at the end of each sub-chapter on Rasayana and Charaka, he actually says, and these were the 9 recipes for so-and-so. So you can kind of count it a bit more easily. The other works don't help you out that way. But what you can see from this is that basically this idea of it being about longevity, rejuvenation, and so on, and not so much about diseases, that diseases is a bit of an afterthought and the emphasis is on the other things, is borne out by most of the works, except for the Ashtanga Sangraha, where, you know, the weighting is about half-half. Has a lot of recipes, and about half of them are about specific disease groups. my first impression had been when I started reading Rasayana chapters that there was a linear development from early works to later works, the early works not being about disease and the later works increasingly being about disease. And looking at the numbers, this is simply not true. Rather, we have this sort of high point about disease with the Ashtanga Sangraha, and then again maybe with the Vangasena Sangraha. And I was wondering, why did I have this impression? What you do have is a heightened number of diseases mentioned in the later works. So you will have more diseases, so you have one formulation that is then against 20 diseases, let's say, instead of against 5. So you have just a higher number of disease groups mentioned, and this is probably what gave me this impression. It's not completely linear, and I think I need to do a bit more work on understanding how to sort of categorize this. But this is the general impression you get. So what kinds of diseases are mentioned? Now, thinking of Rasayana as something that's to do with longevity, rejuvenation, anti-aging, and so on, the idea of age-related disease comes up. And there's a definition, again, in the Sushruta Samhita, so this early century CE work, where the author talks about the stages of life, and this is a passage that my colleague Dagmar will be speaking about in more detail later. But the thing that I want to point to here is the sentence, after 17, one whose bodily tissues, senses, strength, vigor, and energy is daily decreasing, who has wrinkles, grey hair, and is bald, who's overcome with complications beginning with cough and dyspnea, is called old. Now, if we look at things like bodily tissues, senses, strength, vigor, and energy, these are the things that were covered by the general purpose Rasayana keywords that I showed earlier. Wrinkles, grey hair, and bald, you can also see this age-related. These are, by the way, considered diseases. So they can be minor diseases, but they can also be secondary disease symptoms. So it's a little bit tricky not to so I had this problem with looking at what do I count as a disease and what do I not. I put in wrinkles, grey hair, and baldness into non-diseases for general Rasayana purposes, and that's a little bit inexact. But looking here at complications beginning with cough and dyspnea, so Kasa and Shvasa, these are disease categories that occur really often in all Rasayana chapters that I have looked at. So it's often one of the first things that are covered by Rasayana therapy. And the key word here is complications. The Sanskrit word is upadrava. So I checked out the upadrava chapter in the Sutrasthana Samhita. There's actually several. I looked at the one in the Sutrasthana. The Sutrasthana is the sort of part of the work that is about foundational principles, basic principles. So you get some basic definitions in this part of the work. Where Sushruta says the diseases that are associated with complications become incurable except for by Rasayanas. So this is a pretty big statement, because then in the chapter, when you read through the chapter, what you see is that diseases associated with complications are diseases that the physician is advised to no longer treat, as they're very difficult to treat, and this is something that where the physician has the option of no longer treating, except, of course, you can use the option of using a Rasayana. So this puts Rasayana as a medicine into a category of a particularly powerful medicine. So I think this is really worth stating. So, because my question was, what's the difference between Rasayana as a medicine and other medicine? Why not just normal medicine? So this seems to be the difference. Yeah. So, now I made some kind of boring tables just to prove my point. Basically, in the chapter on Upadrava, on complication, lists first the 8 great diseases, the Mahavyadhi. I've made it red because in the Sushruta Samhita and the Rasayana chapter, the Mahavyadhis, the great diseases, are actually listed as something that is treated by Rasayana. Then these are the 8 diseases listed. I've again marked red disease categories that again occur in the Sushruta Samhita. So you can see that they should all be read in a way, because all of the Mahavyadhis are, as a top category, are mentioned in the Rasayana chapter. And then there were still leftover ones, but those are covered by the complications that arise from the Mahavyadhis and extra disease groups that are all mentioned in this chapter in the Sushruta Samhita, so that in the end you cover almost all of the diseases that are mentioned in the Rasāyana chapter. So finally, we are left with 4 diseases, or disease groups rather, that are mentioned in the Rasāyana chapter that are not covered by these Mahavyadhis, these great diseases and their complications, namely Shnipada, and I wonder how one pronounces that. Elephantiasis? Does anybody have a suggestion how to pronounce that word?
Elephantiasis.
Elephantiasis, great. And then enlargement of the glands, and then goiter, and finally Visha, poisoning. Poisoning could be what I usually would put into the category of supernatural effects. As in, you take a medicine and you can no longer be poisoned. It's not so much as a medicinal antidote, but as something that gives you a special power of being able to withstand poison. But I'm not sure, it could just be a regular medicinal antidote. And I really don't know what to do with these disease categories, so obviously I have to do some more looking. But otherwise, we're really covered with the Upadrava section. So then in that we can sort of summarize that Rasayana is for particularly difficult diseases and their complications, diseases that would otherwise not be treatable. So finally, I think there's a lot more to be said about, deeper motivations of taking Rasayana and who are the people who are taking Rasayana and so on. So I would like to actually end with something that I find very interesting that is kind of unrelated to everything that I've said now, and it's this. So Rasayana is mostly directed at men. So a man is the consumer of Rasayana medicine usually. You do have mention of women's fertility, especially in later works, and then also about making breasts more plump. But, that's it. And everything else seems to be sort of directed at men. Now, today we have this, when we think about rejuvenation, this was a search for anti-aging before and after, and I logged out of Google in order so that it wouldn't be directed at my profile. And I don't know exactly, so I'd be very interested if men in the audience would try a search for anti-aging. I also tried rejuvenation, I tried vieillissement and rajeunissement. You get different results each time. It's kind of interesting what the sort of emphasis is, but it's definitely always women that you get as a picture. So modern rejuvenation and anti-aging is at least to a very big extent, seems to be directed at women, though I think the trend is now to direct it a bit more at men. So for the Sanskrit Rasayana, it's more for men. And to me this brings up some questions about what was expected of men 2,000 years ago. They were supposed to be virile, they were supposed to be strong and intelligent, and they were also supposed to look really good. Something has changed, So anyway, this is just something that I find quite interesting, and I think I will end here because I think my time is up.